Now, I'm horrid at numbers, but I feel like this was my best reading month, and let me explain. So in the month of June, I was participating in the Tarot Readathon. I was on Team Swords, and this was honestly a readathon I was so hyped about because in past years, I just never was able to join it because I always missed it or something was happening. And so this year, I was so excited to go and join. I got my tarot cards out and just had so much fun going and doing a daily tarot card pull. I really miss going and doing tarot card readings. I used to do it a lot in my early 20s and then kind of fell out of it. So it was fun just going and reshuffling and going and picking out cards and seeing what the card prompts would line up with. But then things kind of happened and I kind of fell into a huge depressive episode in the beginning of June. Just a lot of unfortunate things happened at once. I was kind of struggling to really find joy in a lot of things. And then I rediscovered my love of reading. And I know I've kind of talked about that in the past, but this was definitely different. I reread some books in a series that I've always really enjoyed, and that brought back a lot of the excitement for reading and picking up books. And it was just so much fun. So let me get into it and I'll go and talk to you about a lot of the books I read, and you can see what I'm talking about with some of my excitement for the books. So for the month of June, I read a total of 7 books, and that's kind of around my average, give or take. It seems like I'm anywhere from 6 to 8 books depending on the month, but I did have one book that was a DNF this month as well. I read a total of 2,415 pages, which is really, really cool. And a lot of the books that I read were around 4 stars. So that was really nice, but the average was 3.86, but I rated 3 books 4 stars and 2 books 4.25 stars. So I feel like that is a really high win, especially after dealing with a lot of reading slump months. Starting off with a book that I would definitely say I would not recommend is Bride of Brutal Hearts by Kate Stevens. This is the one that I DNF'd. I actually got an ALC for this book from NerdFam and super thankful. I was so excited about this book because it seemed like it was a bookworm main character that ends up kind of getting stuck into a difficult situation with vampires and whatnot, and I was intrigued. As someone that is a bookworm, anytime a main character is labeled that way, I'm excited. Also, the thing with the main character too was that she had a chronic illness, and I love any sort of disability rep in books, especially when it's coming up on Disability Pride Month. I just think it's really great to go and find more books with representation that I could go and recommend, especially if it is one that I really love. But that was not the case with this one. This audiobook was 28 hours and 32 minutes. I'm not joking. I am not joking. I'm kind of terrified to know how many pages were in this book. I think I had this on 1.5, 1.75, because I was trying to get through it as quickly as possible. It was going to work for one of my tarot cards that I pulled and would fit perfectly for the prompt, as well as the weekly card that we would get for our team. And I tried my hardest. I think I got at least 10 hours into the book, give or take, and I had to stop. It was absolutely horrendous. I did not like it at all. This was a story that the main character kind of gets pulled out of her life because in this society, I guess if you are not worthy of carrying a child or can't carry a child at all, which there's a trigger warning in this book for infertility, but depending on what your age is, if you have not been able to have a child and you aren't married, you're kind of worthless. A huge thing is that these vampires are basically feeding off of these people and looking at them as blood supplies. And I guess a bunch of people get chosen to get sent off, and the main character ends up going and volunteering for her sister, which is very Hunger Games like. And I was like, cool, I'm interested in this. But then things just kind of continued not being great. I also got a huge ick from some of the voices that the narrators chose to use, because this was a multi-cast audiobook, which I really love. But one of the voices, it seemed like they were trying to do the whole Astarian voice for anyone that's played BG3. and it just was not great. It gave me the ick. I just did not enjoy it. And I kept looking through some different reviews for the book and everything to see if it was just me, if I should stick through it. And some other people that I saw said, may this love never find me. So I was just like, you know what? This is a great book to go in DNF. So I felt really bad because especially when it is like an indie book, I want to give it a fair shot, but I couldn't do this. This book was not for me at all. I was not the crowd to go and read this book, which definitely was a bummer because it had chronic illness representation, which I was very excited for. Then, since we're kind of starting out on a very low note and talking about books I was not too pleased with, we're also going to talk about Rising by Nikole. This is also a book I'd probably not go and recommend. I was very, very excited for this book because it kind of dealt with the post-apocalyptic setting. It had zombies, but it also had different powers that people would get. And I was like, this is so cool. This is zombie apocalypse meets Avatar: The Last Airbender. And I am so intrigued. And this book was honestly a huge letdown. It was a very thick book, and the thing is, like, when we start off the story, we're basically going and picking up where things have already started. The apocalypse has basically happened. People have kind of already dealt with a survival piece, so they're starting off in a civilization and dealing with trying to go in, make sure that their city is protected, but also making sure that the oncoming onslaught of zombies are handled. But the thing is, it seems like there might be someone not trustworthy that's in their town, because the main character, she is kind of taking a little bit of a rest day and everything. She's trying to go and recoup, and then while she's doing that, she learns that her soldiers that were sent off to go and do some scouting got attacked. But the thing is, someone she cares about, who's basically her partner, her fiance, got attacked as well. And the thing is, he's kind of on his deathbed, but no one really wants to tell her because they don't want her to spiral. And she does end up going and spiraling and going into this huge wave of grief. And the thing is, like, there were some really great concepts and ideas and the setting and everything. But the thing that didn't work for me with this book was that instead of going and letting things play out and letting you ride along with the story, it was telling you everything that had happened. And you'd get a little bit of dialogue, but then all of a sudden they'd have to explain to you why this was happening and what happened in the past, and going and talking about that moment in the past, and then jumping to the future, and then basically fast forwarding a couple of weeks, and then you're suddenly in that moment, maybe there for a couple of paragraphs before getting told again what happened, going to the past, and then moving forward a couple of weeks. I just didn't really like how the author ended up going and writing things. It just was very long-winded in the way that is very slow to go and follow along with, especially with the fact that, like I said, you're being told everything that's happening instead of actually experiencing it as the reader. So this book was definitely a letdown. I was incredibly disappointed with it. We only got a few small snippets of moments with zombies as well, and some stuff was also not very clear with this book either. There was a key at the beginning of the book that showed you the map of the settlements. I'm assuming that it is in the US, or at least like between the US and Canada. It's not exactly clear, but it seems like it does take place in our world, but the areas are a little bit different after the apocalypse, of course, happens. And then there's also a key letting you know like the different types of powers each person has, because if you do not get infected when everything first happens and you don't turn into a zombie, you get powers. And the powers are all kind of different, and they did have a key for it, but the thing that didn't make sense to me is that while you're going and reading the story and everything, you'll learn about someone that has a certain power or something, but then it wouldn't exactly line up with the key, or you'd get something different that wasn't really explained at the beginning. So there was a lot of stuff that I feel like could have been edited a lot better. This book really needed a good editor. And I also checked the reviews for this book as well, just to kind of feel a little bit validated and everything, and not that I was being too picky, because that tends to be the case with zombie books, and I was not being too picky. There were a lot of people that shared the same feelings as me, felt like this book needed to have a little bit more editing done with it. I did see, however, that there were some people that said the next book was better. So the thing is, for this book, I ended up going and reading it for my Love It or Lose It series, and I will link the video up here if you'd like to go and see my reaction as I went along with the book. I am planning on more than likely unhauling this book, but I do want to read the second, so I'm gonna try to go and pick it up through my library, and we'll see if I end up liking it and wanting to continue the series, because it could be a situation where the first book was a complete failure, but maybe the second book was a lot better. We shall see, but honestly, I wasn't too much of a fan of this book, and if anyone has read it, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it in the comments below. It's a bummer, because this is an indie author, a BIPOC author, and I was just very excited for this book, but it was just a huge letdown. Let's talk about a book that was not a letdown, and that surprisingly was Heart Still Beating by Brooke. I was pleasantly surprised by this book. So the thing with this one is that it is also kind of a zombie apocalypse book. As you can tell, I was just in a certain dystopian, post-apocalyptic mood for the month of June. And honestly, I love that for myself, because those are some of my favorite types of books to go and read, or even movies to go and watch. With this one, I was a little bit nervous because I wasn't sure if this book would be on the cheesier side of things. And when it comes to zombies or any creatures like zombies, I don't want cheesy. I want something that really is survival and brutal, and one of those things where you're wondering, are these people going to survive? What's going to happen here? What are they going to do? Are they going to change the type of person they are from page 1 to the end of the book? What's going to happen here? I'm always just very invested in wanting to know what happens. So with this book, we have two main characters, and the thing is, these two people are best friends. They kind of grew up together, they're childhood best friends, but the thing is, they had a huge crush on each other. And you know, when you're a kid and everything like that, you're nervous to go and make the first move. You don't know if that other person shares the same feelings or whatnot, and that was kind of the case with these two. They really liked each other, but they weren't sure if the other person liked them. And then one of the girls decides to make the first move and kisses the other girl, but unfortunately, literally the next day, the end of the world happens, and one of them has to go and leave. And they don't get to say any goodbyes or anything. They basically wake up and learn that the other person has left with their family. So they kind of go about things trying to go and survive with their own family, but still thinking about this other person. And then they get wind that the older sibling of their best friend is on this island, and they're like, okay, we're gonna go and get there. We're gonna try to go and make it here and see what happened to them, and basically find out that the person that they had a crush on and was their best friend has turned into a zombie and is now one of those. So that's kind of a little bit of the backstory. So when we start this book, we basically learn that the person that is a zombie has been injected with something that makes them more human, and they are going to be a new member of this island that the other girl is a part of. And so there's a lot of baggage here, because yes, they had feelings for each other, but at the same time, the person that they loved is now a zombie, something that they have been fighting to go and survive against. And the person that is now a zombie is also dealing with a lot of the things that they did when they were infected, and also dealing with the human side of them. And there's that constant battle of, I can't believe I did this. How can I move forward with this? I am a monster. How is anyone going to accept me? How am I going to accept me? So there were a lot of these really great pieces and character growth moments. There were two different POVs. So we got to see one from Mara, who's the one that turned into the zombie, and then Rory, who is the one that is human. And I believe they called them tickers in this book, but they're basically kind of like zombies, except a little bit more human after the injections happen. This book kind of reminded me a little bit of Warm Bodies, but instead of going and having a lot of those human memories from eating a brain, this was more of an injection that brought back the humanity to someone that's already been infected. This was so good, and I was just pleasantly surprised. It was a YA book, and some moments were very obvious because there would be moments where so-and-so went and said a very unkind word or gave a rude hand gesture or something like that. And I was like, okay, yeah, this is definitely YA. But then there were some really gory moments because it's a zombie apocalypse. They're fighting some zombies. And we got to experience some of that as well. But there were also some other things where it's like, there's these monsters, but then there's another type of monster, and which one should you be more worried and concerned about? I thought this was great. This was a great sapphic read for Pride Month as well. So yeah, I think I would highly recommend this one, especially if you're someone that wants to kind of dabble a little bit in the zombie apocalypse world, but not make it too gory and scary, I guess. This would be a good stepping stone towards that. I also realized I'm talking about these books quite a bit, so apologies there. I'm just very opinionated, I guess, this morning. It might be because yesterday was the 4th of July and I'm still a little tired and grumpy from people setting off fireworks in our neighborhood, even though they're not supposed to because we're in Colorado and we have some fires around us, but also just because it breaks my heart constantly to see how much fireworks scare my fur babies. So she woke up and she's grouchy. Next up, I'm going to talk about Next Time Will Be Our Turn by Jessie Q. Sutanto. Hopefully I'm saying that name right. This was the book that we read for the Dungeons and Book Dragons book club. This is a book club that Ivy made with a lot of the co-hosts from last year's Dungeons and Book Dragons Readathon. This is our second book that we've read so far. I'll go and link the video where we ended up going and doing our discussion. But this book is kind of a little bit of a hit or miss for me. I'll probably say maybe I'd recommend this one, but this is one of those books that you kind of need to go in with a different mindset and know that this book isn't necessarily a romance. It's also labeled as a historic fiction, which I don't know, I have mixed feelings about that too. I'm not quite sure where I'd label this book, but basically with this, the premise is that we're hearing the story of a grandmother and her childhood and her experiences as she's going and recounting that and letters to her granddaughter and kind of learning about the different experiences that she's gone through, how she moved from Indonesia to the US and dealing with the different cultural experiences that way, and then how life basically changed for her and a lot of the things that she learned along the way. This book was one of those that was very slow going at parts, but then at other parts went really fast and quick. And for a lot of people, especially the ones that were a part of the book club and read the book with us, they got really emotional, and there were a few moments that my eyes got a little bit misty. But another thing happened with this book that I absolutely dislike. I don't like when stories do what this author did with it, and it kind of makes me angry to the point where it's something that I never touch again. Specifically if this whole thing happens in movies, then I don't like it and I never pick it up again. And I'm trying to be very vague because I don't want to give spoilers, because that really disrupts a lot of things in the whole story. There were also a few pieces that I didn't necessarily think of either until I got together with the other co-hosts, and I didn't see it at first, but a huge thing that kind of felt very icky for a lot of the other co-hosts was that there was kind of like this little bit of grooming aspect as well with this book. And the thing is, our main character, the grandma, she's 16 when she comes from Indonesia to the US and ends up going and living with her older sister who got sent there earlier. So she's, as the term goes, fob. She's fresh off the boat. She's not experienced a lot of things. She has a lot of the upbringing that is very popular in Asian culture, so she has a lot of that mindset. But at the same time, her sister has been far more Americanized, and she has a different mentality towards a lot of things that our other character does. But instead of being kind and gentle and educating her, she kind of treats her with more of a tough love situation. And so our main character is kind of struggling to go and adjust to everything. And she finds this one girl that she basically learns she has a crush on. And that girl takes her under her wing and they become really good friends. But the thing is, they have a pretty good age difference. I want to say the other girl is maybe 19 or 20 and the other girl's 16. And there's some parts that make it seem very sisterly, but then other parts that seem like, okay, why are you hanging out with someone that's a lot younger than you, especially alone when you have a girlfriend? There were just some pieces that the other co-hosts brought up that I was like, okay, yeah, no, you guys have a good point. I didn't see it that way because I kind of looked at it as like an older sister, a mentor in that way. But there was a male character that was kind of doing something similar, and that person gave me the ick. So there were some great conversations that our book club had about kind of the gender norms, about how we'll feel one way, like being on high alert with someone that's a male that acts a certain way, but if it's a female, we don't. And so it was a really great conversation that the book club had over this book. We all kind of rated it around the same way because there were some parts that were great about this book and some great comments about culture, the patriarchy, and women expectations and whatnot, and breaking those gender norms. But it's like the author had a lot of these great moments that were extremely quotable, but then she didn't have any follow through and just didn't handle some of these moments in the way that we would have hoped. So this book is a maybe. There was a lot of really promising parts to it, but unfortunately it just kind of fell flat at the end. So if you're curious about this book and at least want to have some great quotes for your reading journal, I would say to go and pick it up. Then another book I read was Slinger by Rachel Schneider. I was a little bit behind on this one. I feel like this book was very popular last year, and I want to say I either picked it up on Everend or some other reading app, and it was kind of one that I was just trying to go and finish, get off of my checklist. This worked for a prompt not only for the Romantasy bingo board, but also for the Tarot Readathon because the card I pulled was perfect and the weekly card. So I did listen to this one, and I want to say yes, I would say this was a good one. I did really enjoy it, and some of the magic system and the way things worked. I feel like maybe the beginning of the book was a little bit slower going, but I did enjoy it towards the end of the book. I think there was a good cliffhanger as well that from my memory makes me want to go and check out the next book and see what happens. But this was a book that I read at the beginning of the month, so my memory is a little bit hazy on it, but I do at the end of the day remember that I did have a pretty decent time with it. All right. So last books we're technically going to talk about, I am going to lump together because they are a part of a series. So that would be Day Zero, which is book 3.5 in the Arcana Chronicles by Kresley Cole, Arcana Rising, which is book 4, and then The Dark Calling, which is book 5. So if you're not aware, this is a part of the Arcana Chronicles series. These are the 3 books that I read last month. I really love this book series. This is one that I started reading in college and then just kind of tapered off because the author was taking her time writing some of the last few books, and I honestly didn't want the series to end because I was just enjoying it so much. But with how much of a roller coaster June was, I wanted to read something that I would really enjoy. And the series has a lot of elements that are some of my favorite things and are some pieces that I do look for in books that I pick up. So when I ended up going and picking it up again, I started with Day Zero because that was kind of a prequel book to go and read after you finish Dead of Winter. And that really got my reading bug, I guess, brought back, and I was just devouring the books. I didn't want to put them down, and I would have read the very last book in the series. However, I ran out of time because the 3-card spread that I had did not work for the very last book. So I unfortunately did not get to finish the series in June. But basically, to go and give you some information on it, I'm not going to tell you about these 3 books because that's going to be huge spoilers. So instead I'll tell you about Poison Princess, and this is the very first book. It does have a different cover. This was one of the original covers for the book when it came out. So this series, if you can't tell, is one that I'm 100% going to go and say yes on. It will be one that I recommend. I think it is rated YA, so just in case if that is something that you're not interested in. But the thing I love about this is that it is post-apocalyptic and it has tarot cards involved in it. So as you can see, this was perfect for the Tarot Readathon last month. Our main character's name is Evie Green, and at the beginning of the story, we basically learned that she was very, very close to her grandma, who always played with tarot cards and kind of was very ominous about some things with her and vague about, here's this card, this is you, Evie, this is you, and this is another card that you need to watch out for, and was teaching her all of these things. And I guess the mom did not like what the grandma was doing and basically forbid her from ever seeing Evie again. But as Evie got older, there were some strange things that ended up coming up, and Evie was drawing very dark photos, and her mom was terrified. So she sent her to a mental institution to basically get rid of a lot of the teachings that the grandmother had ingrained in her. So at the beginning of the story, we're basically following Evie as she's coming back after taking, I think, a year break from her school. And no one at the school knows why Evie left. And Evie is pretty popular. She's a cheerleader, all of that stuff. And she's basically friends with everyone at the school. She's not a bully. She wants to just, you know, make everyone's life nice and not have anyone feel alone. Well, when she comes back to school, she sees some kids that are from the Bayou that are now enrolled in this school, and they are kind of troublemakers, and she's a little bit worried about them, but tries to make nice. And then there is a party, and after the party, that is when something called the Flash happened. And with the story, you learn that the Flash is this event that takes place every few years. And when the Flash happens, all of the people that are major Arcana cards get activated. So Evie is actually the Empress card, and she starts coming into some of her powers. And her powers kind of remind me a little bit of Poison Ivy, who is a villain from Batman. And that is also one of the reasons why I also really loved this book, because Poison Ivy is one of my all-time favorite villains. I have so many comic books that have her in them, and if that's something you're interested in, let me know down in the comments below, because I have a lot of comics and I would love to go and show them off, but I'm never sure if that's something other people are interested in. So let me know. Basically, the whole thing with this is once the Flash happens and all the major Arcana cards are activated, they basically have to go and fight each other off. And as they go and fight each other off, whoever kills that person gets their glyph on them, and whoever is the last remaining one at the end wins. And it's just kind of like this apocalyptic Hunger Games type of thing, but with the tarot cards. And it's just something that I really, really love. There's also something that's very close to zombies as well. So as you can see, this book series just has so many elements that I absolutely enjoy. I love this series so much, and I am reading the very last book. So as you can tell, I'm so not ready to go and say goodbye to the series, but at the same time, I need to know what happens, because there is a love triangle in the series. It kind of feels a little bit like Why Choose? Some of the books can be a little bit on the slower side, but usually at some point there's always something that picks up and it just makes you want to pick up the next book and know what happens next. So yeah, I absolutely love this series. I highly recommend it until I read the last book, because that could change how I feel about this series in general. So yeah, those were the 7 books that I read in the month of June. Yeah, I'm so sorry with how chatty I was in this video. I just have a lot of opinions about some of the books that I read. As you can tell, I had a pretty decent reading month, which honestly I was very happy about, because it was very needed with how low parts of that month were for me. So I'm excited to continue reading in July. I have a lot of really great books picked out. I've already done my July TBR games, so I'll link it up here so you can go and watch it. It will also be down in the description below. But I'm curious to know, how was your reading month in the month of June? Did you have a good reading month? Did you not? Were you part of the Tarot Readathon? What team? Tell me all the details. And if you got to this point in the video and you don't know what to comment, I know we've probably commented this before, but since a lot of my books had to do with zombies in June, leave some zombies down in the comments below. Let's just have a little zombie apocalypse in the comments. I think that would be really fun. But yeah, leave that down in the comments below. And as always, if you liked this video, it would mean the world to me if you liked or even subscribed. And then there's also a handy dandy thing called hypes. So if you could go and hype up my channel, that just helps push me out to other people on the internet and would mean so, so much to me. And I always forget this too, but we do have a Discord channel as well. If you would be interested in joining, I have a link for that as well in the description. We're just a really cozy community. We talk about video games, books. We also have a disability channel as well. So if you ever want to kind of feel seen and relate to other people that are dealing with their disabilities, we also have that as well. It's a very, very safe space. But as always, I wrap up my videos with this little reminder to always remember that you're worthy and capable of amazing things. Bye, friends.